So let us talk about something property developers and city councils do not want you thinking about too hard. There are cities in the UK that are bleeding population, places where more people are leaving than arriving, where the for sale signs outnumber the sold signs by a depressing margin, and where the only people moving in are doing so because they literally cannot afford anywhere else, or they are being placed there by councils from other areas who are essentially exporting their social problems. This is not about the trendy London exodus stories of people discovering the joys of Yorkshire or Cornwall during lockdown. It is not about romantic tales of city workers becoming artisan cheesemakers in the countryside. We are talking about proper population decline, the kind where census data shows consistent year-on-year drops, where schools are closing because there are not enough children to fill them, where high streets look like something from a zombie apocalypse film, with more closed shops than open ones. And here is the thing that should concern everyone. This is not happening to cute market towns or remote Scottish islands that were always going to struggle with modern economic realities. These are cities, proper cities, with universities and hospitals, and infrastructure, and transport links, places that were supposed to be protected by their size and economic diversity, places that theoretically had all the ingredients for success. But something has gone wrong, or rather, lots of things have gone wrong simultaneously over decades, and people are voting with their feet, which is the most honest and brutal form of social commentary there is. You can ignore statistics, you can dismiss surveys, you can argue about perception versus reality, but when people physically leave somewhere, when they pack up their lives and go somewhere else, that is an undeniable signal that something is fundamentally broken. So let us dive into 10 UK cities that nobody is moving to anymore. And more importantly, let us actually talk about why, because the reasons are usually more complicated and more interesting than just that it is a bit rough or that there are no jobs. Starting with Sunderland. If you are from the Northeast, you already know where this is going. You have lived this story or watched it unfold. Sunderland's population has been declining since the 1970s, which should tell you something about how long this problem has been festering without any real solution or intervention that has worked. Peak population was about 290,000 in the mid-20th century. Now it is down to about 275,000, and that decline is accelerating rather than slowing, which is the really concerning bit. The city built its entire identity around shipbuilding, a massive industry that employed tens of thousands, and that industry defined the culture and the economy and the social fabric of the place. It gave men purpose, wages, and pride. Then it all died, not gradually with a managed transition and retraining programs, not with government support to develop alternative industries. It simply died. Shipyards closed, jobs disappeared, and nobody in power had a coherent plan for what came next or how to replace that lost economic base. What is left is a city that feels like it is treading water at best, actively sinking at worst. It goes through the motions without any clear vision of where it is heading or how it gets better. The job market is brutal unless you work in healthcare or education, and even those sectors struggle with recruitment, because who wants to move to Sunderland for a nursing job that pays barely above minimum wage, when you could do the same work in Newcastle or Durham or many other places? Median wages are about £23,000 a year, which sounds okay in isolation until you remember that is median household income for a city, and try living on that with rent or a mortgage and council tax and energy bills and the cost of literally everything rising month after month. House prices are low. Median house prices are around £140,000, which seems like a bargain, especially if you are from the southeast where that would not buy you a parking space, until you realize there is a very good reason they are that cheap. And it is not because Sunderland is a hidden gem waiting to be discovered by property investors. The city center is struggling, truly struggling, with empty shops everywhere, the kind of retail apocalypse that makes you wonder if physical shops have any future at all. The Bridges shopping center looks half dead most days. Debenhams is gone, many other anchor stores have closed, and they have been replaced by charity shops, vape shops, and the many phone repair shops that line the high street. There has been talk of regeneration for years, riverside development's cultural investment, turning old shipyard sites into something new and exciting. But so far, it has mostly been talk. Some things have happened. The Stadium of Light is decent. There has been some waterfront development, but it is not enough to reverse the fundamental problems. And the social problems are real. Crime rates are above average. Unemployment is persistently high. Health outcomes are some of the worst in the country. And life expectancy is significantly lower than the national average. It is the kind of data that makes you angry because it seems so obviously fixable with proper investment and political will. But neither of those things have materialized. So people leave, especially young people with qualifications and options. They finish university elsewhere and never come back. Or they grow up in Sunderland and leave at the first opportunity. This brain drain is devastating for a city. Moving to Blackpool, and this one's particularly sad because Blackpool used to be the place, the British seaside destination, where working-class families from across the north came for their holidays, candy floss, and donkey rides, the pleasure beach, and walking along the seafront eating fish and chips wrapped in newspaper. That version of Blackpool still exists in memory and nostalgia in the stories grandparents tell about magical childhood holidays. But the reality on the ground today is much, much grimmer. The population has been declining slowly but steadily for decades, sitting around 140,000 now. And the demographic makeup is skewing progressively older and poorer as anyone with means or prospects or ambition leaves for literally anywhere else. Here is what killed Blackpool, and you can trace it to a very specific moment in British social history: cheap flights to Spain. Seriously. When package holidays to Benidorm and Torremolinos and the Costa del Sol became genuinely affordable for ordinary working-class families in the 1980s and especially the 1990s. Why on earth would you go to Blackpool and hope desperately for sunshine and pray the weather holds when you could get absolutely guaranteed heat and proper beaches that do not involve dodging sewage warnings or freezing to death in the Irish Sea? The tourist industry collapsed. Not completely overnight, but substantially and irreversibly, and nothing has come close to replacing it despite decades of trying. The town tried desperately to rebrand, with massive investment in the pleasure beach to modernize the rides, sprucing up the tower, the illuminations every autumn that bring in some tourism, conference center development to attract business tourism and corporate events. But it is nowhere near enough to replace the lost holiday trade. What you are left with is a city that has become a dumping ground for social problems. Councils from other areas send homeless people and problem families to Blackpool because accommodation is cheap. Bed and breakfasts that used to house holidaymakers now house people on benefits, entire streets of them. It has created this concentration of poverty and social dysfunction that is really hard to escape. Crime rates are shockingly high, drugs are a massive problem, health outcomes are terrible. The city has the lowest life expectancy in England for men, which is a devastating statistic. The job market is almost entirely seasonal: tourism and hospitality work, minimum wage, 0 hours contracts, no security, no future. Young people leave as soon as they can. Anyone with ambition or education gets out, leaving behind an aging population and people who cannot afford to leave. House prices are low, median around 130,000. But that is because nobody wants to buy there, unless they are buy-to-let landlords exploiting the benefit system. The beach is still there, the tower is still standing, but walking around Blackpool feels like visiting a place that has given up, that knows its best days are behind it, and has no idea how to create new ones. Next up is Burnley, in Lancashire, and this is classic post-industrial northern town decline. Population peaked around 90,000 in the mid-19th century, when the textile mills were going strong. Now, it is down to about 73,000 and still dropping. The mills closed, the jobs left, and despite decades of talk about regeneration and investment, nothing has really replaced that lost industry in any meaningful way. The town has a reputation problem that is hard to shake, and some of it is deserved. It gained national attention for race riots in 2001, tension between white and Asian communities that exploded into violence. While things have calmed down since, the underlying tensions have not fully resolved. The town feels divided, not just economically, but socially and geographically. There are areas that do not mix, communities that exist in parallel rather than together. It is uncomfortable to talk about, but it is reality, and it affects everything from politics to where people choose to live. The economy is struggling. Unemployment is high, wages are low, with a median around £20,000. The town center is dying, a classic high street retail apocalypse. Shops are closing, replaced by bookmakers, charity shops, and pound stores. There is a market, but it is a shadow of what it used to be. Burnley Football Club is probably the town's biggest success story and source of pride, but one football club cannot fix systemic economic problems. Housing is incredibly cheap. You can get terraced houses for £50,000, £60,000, or £70,000, which sounds amazing until you understand that they are that cheap because demand is non-existent. People are not moving to Burnley for opportunity or lifestyle. They are there because they were born there and cannot afford to leave, or they have been priced out of everywhere else. It has become a place of last resort rather than choice, which is brutal but true. Crime is a problem, particularly drug-related crime, and there are areas you would not want to walk through after dark. Health outcomes are poor, and life expectancy is below average. The sense you get from statistics and from on-the-ground accounts is of a town that is struggling with multiple overlapping problems and does not have the resources or political attention to fix them. So people leave, particularly young people and families who have the means, and the population continues its slow decline. Moving to Stoke-on-Trent, which I know I mentioned in the pension retirement list as affordable, and it is, but that affordability comes with the massive downside that it's a city people are actively leaving. The population has been in decline for decades. It peaked around 300,000 in the 1960s, and now it is down to about 250,000. The pottery industry that defined the city, the industry that made Stoke famous worldwide, has massively contracted. Factories closed, jobs were exported to places with cheaper labor, and the city has struggled to find a new identity or economic base. The city is weird geographically. 6 towns merged together: Hanley, Burslem, Tunstall, Longton, Fenton, and Stoke. None of them is quite a proper city center, and the area is spread out and disconnected. That fragmentation makes the place feel like it is never quite pulled together into something cohesive. Each town has its own high street, most of them struggling, and retail is concentrated in the Potteries shopping center in Hanley, which is itself half empty. Jobs are scarce outside of healthcare and education, and even those sectors do not pay well. Median wage is around 21,000, and household income is barely higher. Staffordshire University is there, but it does not seem to generate the kind of graduate retention other university cities manage. Students come, get their degrees, and leave, contributing to the economy while they are there but not staying to build lives and careers. Crime is above average in Stoke-on-Trent, and some areas are properly rough, with drugs problems and antisocial behavior. The city has a reputation that is hard to shake, jokes about it being grim, and references in pop culture that are not flattering. Whether that reputation is entirely fair is debatable, but perception matters, and the perception is negative enough that people choose other places. Housing is cheap. Median prices are around 135,000, and terraced houses can be under 100 grand. But cheap housing does not attract people if there is no reason to live somewhere beyond affordability. The city is caught in a trap where it is affordable because nobody wants to move there. And nobody wants to move there partly because it is obviously struggling. And round it goes. Let's talk about Hull, or Kingston upon Hull, to give it its proper name that absolutely nobody uses in conversation. The population has been declining fairly consistently since the 1960s. It peaked at around 320,000 and is now down to about 260,000, and the trend shows no signs of reversing. Hull has a weird geographic isolation that has shaped its entire history and economic trajectory. It is genuinely stuck at the end of the line geographically, marooned out on the Humber estuary in a way that means you are never passing through Hull on the way to somewhere else. You are only in Hull if Hull is actively your destination. That has historically severely limited its economic opportunities and connections to the rest of the country, in ways that compound over time. The fishing industry that was once massive for Hull, one of the great fishing ports of Britain, employing thousands directly and thousands more in processing and related industries, has collapsed almost completely, The trawlers are gone. The fish processing is minimal. Entire industries that defined the city for generations just vanished. And while the docks still function for freight and there is still some port activity, it is nothing like the employment levels of the past. Nowhere even close. The city genuinely tried to reinvent itself in recent years. City of Culture 2017 was supposed to be transformational, a big moment that would change everything, with massive investment in arts and culture, raising Hull's profile nationally and internationally, attracting tourists and creative industries, and investment and hope. Some good things did happen. Venues were improved and are actually quite good now. Events were well attended and generated positive coverage. But has it fundamentally changed Hull's long-term trajectory or reversed population decline? Not really. Population is still declining, and young people are still leaving at the first opportunity. The job market is tough. Wages are low, with median household income around $22,000. The city center is struggling. St. Stephen's Shopping Center is half empty. Independent shops are trying to survive, but fighting against online retail and lack of footfall. There are nice bits. The Old Town has character, the marina development is pleasant, but overall, the city feels like it is fighting against economic gravity and losing. Crime rates are high, particularly violent crime and antisocial behavior. Some areas are rough, properly rough, places where you would not leave your car unlocked or walk alone at night. Health outcomes are poor, life expectancy is below average, obesity rates are high, all the markers of deprivation and limited opportunity. Crime and poor health are part of the same vicious cycle. The University of Hull is decent. It brings students and employment, but there is a pattern of students arriving, studying, and leaving, not staying to build lives. The city cannot seem to retain its graduates or attract young professionals, the demographic that drives urban growth and regeneration. So the population ages and shrinks, and the problems compound. Next is Bradford. And this is particularly frustrating and even slightly maddening because Bradford genuinely should be doing so much better than it actually is, given its advantages. It is geographically close to Leeds, which is absolutely booming and one of the UK's major success stories. Bradford is part of a larger metropolitan area with reasonable and improving transport links. It has its own university, bringing students and academic employment. It has genuine history, impressive Victorian architecture, and established cultural institutions. But despite all these apparent advantages, the population has been in steady decline, sitting around 350,000 now, and every trend and indicator suggests that decline will continue rather than reverse. The textile industry that literally built Bradford, that made it one of the wealthiest cities in Victorian Britain, and created the grand buildings that still dominate the city center, is completely gone. The mills have closed or been converted into expensive flats for people who commute to Leeds, or demolished entirely, leaving empty brownfield sites. The city tried quite hard to reinvent itself around finance and professional services, attempting to position itself as an alternative business location to Leeds, but it simply could not compete with Leeds, which is right there, 15 minutes away on the train, and objectively more attractive to businesses and professional workers in almost every measurable way. So Bradford became something it never wanted to be, the affordable overspill and commuter suburb for Leeds, where people live because they cannot afford Leeds property prices, but commute into Leeds for work and increasingly for entertainment, and socializing too. That really is not a recipe for building urban vitality, a strong independent economy, or civic pride. The city has serious deprivation, some of the poorest wards in the country, and health outcomes among the worst. Educational attainment is low. There are ethnic tensions, not violent like the 2001 riots, but underlying divisions between communities, areas that are predominantly white or Asian, but do not really integrate or interact. It creates this fractured city where people live in parallel rather than together, which affects everything from politics to how the city develops. The city center is struggling, the high street is dying, shops are empty, and the Kirkgate Center and Broadway both look rough despite attempts at regeneration. There has been investment. Westfield was supposed to build a massive shopping center that would transform the city center, but the deal collapsed. Millions were wasted, and nothing was built. It is emblematic of Bradford's problems: grand plans that do not materialize, investment that does not quite happen, potential that never quite gets realized. Crime is an issue, including drugs and antisocial behavior. Some areas you really would not want to live in. House prices are low, median around $140,000. But again, low prices reflect low demand. Young professionals choose Leeds or Manchester. Families who can afford to leave do so, leaving behind an aging population and those without the means to move. Middlesbrough is another absolutely classic case of northeastern post-industrial decline, and all the devastating social consequences that follow. The population has been dropping consistently for decades. It peaked at about 160,000 in the mid-20th century. It is now down to about 140,000, and still falling. The steel and chemical industries that built Middlesbrough from basically nothing, that created this entire city in the 19th century and employed generations of families, have massively contracted to the point of near disappearance. The Redcar Steelworks, which was a huge employer for the whole area, closed completely in 2015, taking thousands of direct jobs and probably tens of thousands of indirect jobs in the supply chain. Nothing meaningful has replaced that employment or economic base, despite political promises and talk of regeneration. The town has genuinely shockingly bad social outcomes, the kind of statistics that make you do a double take, because surely nowhere in modern Britain can be that bad. It consistently ranks at, or very near, the absolute bottom nationally for quality of life, for health outcomes, for crime rates, and for educational attainment. Life expectancy is measurably low. Child poverty is horrifyingly high. Unemployment is persistent and generational. The town center is brutal to walk through. The Cleveland Center shopping mall is deeply depressing. Half the units are empty. The shops that survive are visibly struggling. It can feel post-apocalyptic on a quiet weekday afternoon, like everyone has given up. There has been endless talk of regeneration, plans to demolish parts of the center and start completely fresh. But that has been talk for years and years, with extremely limited actual action or visible change. The job market is terrible unless you work in healthcare, and even those jobs do not pay well. Median income is around £20,000, some of the lowest in the country. Young people with any qualifications or prospects leave. Teesside University is the local university, which is fine, but most graduates do not stay in Middlesbrough. They go to Newcastle, or to Leeds, or to Manchester, or to London. Crime is shockingly high, drug problems are severe, and some areas are genuinely dangerous. The town has a reputation as one of the worst places to live in the UK, and whether that reputation is entirely fair or media-driven, it is damaging. Perception becomes reality, and the perception of Middlesbrough is so negative that people actively avoid it. Housing is cheap. Median house price is around £125,000. Terraced houses can be £80,000. But there is a reason. Nobody is moving to Middlesbrough for opportunity or lifestyle. People are there by necessity, or because they are from there and have not managed to leave. It is harsh, but it is what the population data shows. Consistent decline, people leaving, not being replaced. Let's head to Dundee in Scotland. It has a university and it sits on the coast, so on paper it should have things going for it. But the population has been in steady decline for decades. It peaked around 182,000 in the 1970s and is now down to about 150,000. The jute industry that built Dundee died, and while the city has tried to reinvent itself with technology and digital industries, with some success, it has not been enough to reverse population decline. Rockstar North has a presence, and there is a local gaming and tech cluster, but the reboot has not been big enough. Dundee is in an awkward position, overshadowed by Edinburgh and Glasgow, both more attractive for jobs and lifestyle, and by Aberdeen for oil and gas-related work. Dundee is stuck in the middle, not as exciting or well-connected or economically dynamic as its rivals. The V&A Museum was supposed to transform the waterfront and attract tourism and investment. It is beautiful, genuinely world-class, but it has not stopped population decline. The job market is limited, and wages are low compared to other Scottish cities, with the median around 23,000. Young people study at Dundee University or Abertay, then leave for Edinburgh, Glasgow, or London, where opportunities and wages are higher. The city cannot retain its graduates, and without young professionals, the population ages and shrinks. The city center is struggling. The Overgate shopping center is half empty, and the high street is dying like elsewhere. There are rough areas and drug problems, particularly with heroin and cocaine. Crime rates are above average, and the city has poverty issues and areas of significant deprivation. Health outcomes are below national averages. It is not a disaster. Dundee is quite nice in parts, but it is clearly a city that is struggling to grow or even maintain its population. Newport in Wales. And this one's particularly brutal because Newport feels like it should be doing better. It's close to Cardiff, which is growing and successful. It's got motorway connections. It's in a decent location, but population growth has stalled and in some years declined. The city never quite recovered from the death of its traditional industries. Steelworks, docks, coal, all gone, or massively reduced, and the replacement industries have not generated the same employment or wealth. The city suffers from Cardiff's shadow, similar to Dundee with Edinburgh, where anyone with ambition or qualifications tends to move to Cardiff, which is right there and more attractive in almost every way. Newport becomes the affordable overspill where people live because Cardiff is too expensive, commuting in for work, which doesn't build a strong local economy or community identity. The city center feels grim. Friars Walk Shopping Center is newish and trying, but the older parts of the center are struggling, with empty shops and rough characters hanging around. It does not feel safe or pleasant. The nightlife has a reputation for being rough, with fights, drugs, and aggressive drunken behavior, which does not attract people or investment. Crime is an issue, higher than the Wales average, drugs in particular, and antisocial behavior. Some estates are properly rough, places you would not choose to live if you had options. The city has poverty pockets, areas where unemployment is high and opportunities are limited. House prices are lowish, median around $190,000, which is affordable for Wales, but reflects limited demand rather than being a bargain. The issue is, Newport is stuck, not attractive enough to pull people from Cardiff or Bristol, not cheap enough to be the obvious budget choice over other Welsh towns, and not distinctive enough to have its own strong pull. It is in limbo, and cities in limbo tend to struggle. Now, let's talk about Birkenhead, part of the Wirral, but effectively its own city. The population has been declining. The area faces serious economic problems, and it is another example of a place overshadowed by a more successful neighbor, in this case Liverpool, which sits right across the Mersey and is far more attractive. Birkenhead was built on shipbuilding, a massive industry that employed thousands and defined the town. When that industry collapsed, nothing comparable replaced it. The Camel Laird shipyard still operates, but at a fraction of its former employment. The job market is weak, wages are low, unemployment is high, especially among young people. The town center is dying. The Pyramid's shopping center is half empty. Shops are struggling, and there is little vitality. There is constant talk of regeneration, but little actual change. Residential areas range from ordinary to severely run down, with some estates facing serious problems with drugs, crime, and poverty. The obvious question is why someone would live in Birkenhead when Liverpool is so close. Liverpool offers better jobs, better nightlife, and better services, and transport links are decent. Birkenhead has become a cheaper alternative for people who cannot afford Liverpool, but that is not a strong foundation for a city. Population decline reflects this. People leave when they can. They are not replaced, and the town is slowly shrinking. So there you have it. 10 United Kingdom cities that nobody's moving to anymore. Places where the population is in decline, where more people are leaving than arriving every single year, where the future looks uncertain at best and genuinely bleak at worst. And when you look at them collectively, rather than individually, the common threads become absolutely obvious and impossible to ignore. Post-industrial decline and economic collapse, the loss of traditional industries that once employed tens of thousands without any successful replacement or transition to new economic bases, geographic isolation, or the curse of being overshadowed by more successful nearby cities that hoover up all the investment and opportunities and talented people. Serious and compounding social problems including crime, drugs, poverty, and poor health outcomes that create vicious negative feedback loops, making these areas progressively less attractive to anyone who has genuine choices about where to live. Failing high streets and dying retail centers reflect much broader underlying economic weakness and the death of traditional town center shopping. And perhaps most devastatingly, the consistent inability to retain graduates and young professionals, the exact demographic that could potentially drive regeneration and economic renewal if only they would stay. These trends are not inevitable. They are not simply the natural outcome of economic change. They are the direct result of specific policy choices, economic forces, and political decisions that could have been different and could still be different if there were the will to make them so. Proper, sustained investment in infrastructure, in education, in supporting new industries, in helping small businesses, and in cultural amenities and quality of life improvements could genuinely reverse these trends and turn struggling cities around. We have seen it happen in places like Manchester, Leeds, and Glasgow, cities that were written off as post-industrial wastelands in the 1980s, but that successfully reinvented themselves through investment, vision, and sustained effort. But that level of investment and that political will simply is not happening at anywhere near the scale needed for the struggling cities we have discussed. When investment does happen, it is often focused almost exclusively on already successful places that do not desperately need it, rather than on the places that do. And so the gap between successful and struggling cities just gets wider with each passing year. For anyone actually living in these cities, or seriously considering moving to them because the affordability is real, the reality is complicated and not black and white. These places are not uniformly terrible. There are nice areas, decent neighborhoods, and fundamentally good people trying hard to make things better. And the affordability element matters. Housing that would cost £500,000 in the southeast, or £300,000 in a nice market town, can often be had for £100,000 or substantially less. If you are on a tight budget, trying to get on the property ladder, or aiming to retire on a limited fixed income, that is a real and important financial difference that cannot be casually dismissed. But you really do need to go into any decision to move to these places with your eyes completely wide open about the very genuine challenges and very real problems that exist, the genuinely limited job opportunities, and the structurally lower wages compared to more successful cities, the measurably higher crime rates and persistent social problems that are documented, not just media stereotypes or prejudice designed to sell newspapers and generate clicks, the pervasive sense of economic decline and lack of opportunity that pervades these places and materially affects everything, from your immediate daily quality of life to your children's educational outcomes and future career prospects in ways that compound over years and generations. The trend is clear, though. People are voting with their feet, and they are leaving these cities for places with better opportunities, safety, and quality of life. Whether that trend can be reversed depends on political will, investment, and economic changes that currently seem unlikely. So these cities will probably continue shrinking, struggling, and existing in this limbo of managed decline unless something changes fundamentally. And that's the uncomfortable truth behind the trend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go have an existential crisis about regional inequality and why we've built an economy where entire cities are basically written off as unviable. Drop a comment if you're from any of these places and I've got it completely wrong, or completely right, or if you've got other cities that belong on this list. Either way, cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.